Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I've got Dr. Boris Nikolov on from Miami, Fort
Hi.
Lauderdale area. He's with IMIC, IMIC Research, as you can see by his shirt if you're watching on a video. If you're listening, check him out. The links are in the show notes to his LinkedIn profile as well as the YouTube video. We'll have links to Dr. Nikolov's LinkedIn profile. So we're going to talk about, we want this to be kind of informative for the sites. Not enough. Even with the podcasts and videos I'm doing, it's still not enough for the sites. And right now there's pretty challenging times during coronavirus pandemic and a lot of uncertainty, but the industry is still busy at the same time. It's very strange what kind of landscape we're dealing with in our industry. I think we're fortunate because we're in a relatively good industry compared to other ones. I thank God every day I'm not in hospitality or entertainment right now because those people are not, some of those jobs never coming back, but clinical research is showing, hey, this is actually at the forefront of fighting this thing. I mean, this is so now the public is becoming aware. The clinical research, you're going to have a lot of doctors now, Dr. Nikolov, wanting to
Yeah,
do what you do. And so we wanted to start by sharing a little bit about who you are, how you got started, just so we have some context of what IMIC, IMIC research is doing, and then we can get into some strategies for the sites that are already up and running. So thank you very much for coming on.
sure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So how did you get started? Give us like a 2 minute summary of who you are and how somebody gets into research.
Sure. See, I graduated medicine in Bulgaria. Was doing some research there, but that was a long time ago, 1994. So after that, actually, I came to the States, and for circumstances and situations, I needed to go back to Bulgaria. So that was 2006, and we created a big research site there, Acta Medica, which started dealing with a lot of different studies, a lot of specialties. It was a big hospital. And then subsequently, we opened a site here in Miami, and we have been very successful enrolling patients in multiple specialties, multiple diagnoses, multiple studies. We have a large database of patients, and thanks God, we've been really successful. Obviously, there is a couple of maybe months or years that hasn't been so good, but in others, it's been all right. We
Okay, so
do studies in gastroenterology, psychiatry, neurology, pediatrics, and now we're going to start sports medicine, physical medicine, pain management.
wow. Okay, so are you PI for all these studies, or what's the structure like?
No, we work with multiple physicians with multiple specialties, gastroenterologists as well, um, and everyone. I don't have a specialty, so I usually a sub-I or a PI in certain studies. But the majority of studies, I'm a super investigator. Though
Okay,
I have been a PI in a number of studies too in Bulgaria
sure.
in the past.
But you're the owner. You're the owner of IMIC
I'm
Research.
one of the owners, correct?
And
I'm
and
IMC
what
Research.
what was the idea? Like, how did you even get like from Bulgaria? You were introduced to research, like from academic perspective, right? So how does that
Yeah, it was
happen?
really interesting. It was really interesting because in Bulgaria and in other countries in Europe, the research was done only in academic centers, universities. So there was some change in the legislature, and clinical sites and small hospitals were allowed to start doing research. So that's how we started, and we opened the research clinic there, and subsequently here.
I gotcha. And then so what year did you open it here in Miami, in the United States?
2009.
2009. Okay. And so your first year, what was the challenges? I'm assuming you were the PI. But what were some of the
Uh,
challenges? Like you found coordinators, or what were some of those? Because the first year is
well, the
so
challenges was
difficult.
actually to, yeah, the beginning is always difficult no matter what you do. The challenges was actually to find trials because, we were having a very small office, very few patients, and it was hard to find, but when you start a couple of trials and then people know you, refer patients,
Right.
refer studies, and kind of things work on their own little by little.
But that first year, I tell all of our clients because we're in the business. We own our own sites too here, mostly in Southern California, but we have clients across the country, sometimes even across the world. We've had clients in South Africa, Eastern Europe, but usually it's United States. All over the U.S., we help them get studies. And we always tell them, because we work with research naive physicians, we always tell them your first year, maybe even your first 2 years, are going to be the most challenging years. If you can survive those 2 years and learn the process, okay, because you're going to
Right.
learn a lot. I mean, I'm sure we both have stories. We can do a 5 hour podcast on just the stuff we've learned in our first 2 years. You know, when I first
True.
started, Monitor asked me, do you have a CLIA waiver? And I said, of course I do. And then I had to go Google
And you Google
I had to go
it.
Google, but I didn't know what she said. Clear. I thought she said clear, like clear color. So I Googled clear waiver. I couldn't find anything. I was like, what is this thing she's asking about? But these are the things you gotta learn. They're
Yeah,
using
that's true.
acronyms, like, so the
A
first two
lot of
years,
acronyms.
tons, too many. And maybe, why is the industry use so many acronyms? You think they're like very closed, like they don't want more people to get in? Because we need more investigators, we need more sites, we obviously need more patients.
Right.
What's the deal with this?
This is a very good question, actually, because I was thinking about that myself. Somebody recently asked me, what's Alcola? I was like, Jesus, I know what it means, but I don't make me spell it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know each word. But yeah, I don't know, honestly. That's kind of, I guess there is so many terms that it's very difficult to tell them out loud, the long version.
Yeah,
So you start using the short version just for benefit of, I don't know,
I guess
easy,
so.
to be more easy.
I guess so. I think, yeah. Do you go to conferences, like, when now there's no conferences except virtual, but like back in the days, before
Yeah.
Corona, BC, before Corona, we used to go to conferences. Did you go to a lot of these conferences and network with other sites?
We did, but then we stopped. Then we kind of started. We had a lot of presentation, a couple of the conferences,
Yeah.
like Magi.
Hmm. So networking is important. Like Magi, we used to go to these conferences. What about now? What are you doing now, for IMEC research during this pandemic? Like, how are you getting studies? Because we're seeing a lot of studies, but like, how are you making sure that your pipeline is always full? Because that's really important. That's the most important thing right there.
Well, we've been thinking a lot about that actually. We in all the databases of the CROs, some of the pharma. Um, but what we found actually more helpful is working with sites, not CMO, because that's like almost a SMO, but Butword.
Right.
But anyway, like Clean Edge, we started just working with them actually,
Site networks, yeah.
site networks.
Those are good, and maybe we should talk because we have a good, like, a low cost solution for this as well, for
Sure.
getting studies. But that's important. The pipeline, the importance of keeping the pipeline is I mean, there's nothing else really. And then you have to worry about getting the patients for these studies. So what have been some of the strategies? Because right now we're seeing, uh, in 2020, we are seeing a lot of studies. We were seeing a lot in 2019 as well, but we're seeing they're complicated studies. They're not so
They're getting more and
simple,
more complicated.
more and more
I
complex.
think what they're trying to do, they're trying to combine two or three studies in one. So, like efficacy measures, secondary efficacy measures, and then instead of doing one straightforward study, you end up doing one more complicated that will do three results for the same thing.
Yeah, but what do you
It's cheaper
think
for them.
about that? Because I know it's cheaper and the data's probably better, but it's not indicative of, like, those patients that they're like, when these studies get overly complex with inclusion exclusion, it's not
Hmm.
indicative of the average patient on the street,
I
with the
agree.
same condition. So, what is your thoughts on this, and have you talked to any sponsors about this? recently?
Yeah, we usually send our comments when we receive some feasibility or before they start finalizing the projects. It is very true to change their mind. So basically, we try to adapt. But you're right, patients certainly will not be the general type of patients, will be more narrow type of asthma, let's say, patients that would be enrolled in those studies.
That's right. How are you guys getting these patients? Like, is your site built on your PI's private practice, or are your PIs not in private practice? How does it work for you guys?
We are maybe a unique site, I don't know, but we have a large database of research patients that have participated in a study with us before. So we always tell them, look, we're going to have you in mind for the next study. A lot of patients call us referred by other patients, so we enter them in the database. When a study shows up for that indication, we'll call you. And also the PIs have usually a very large clinical practice in which we invite patients from there by looking into their medical records or talking to the patients that are scheduled for certain procedures or diagnosis or taking certain medications. So it has been relatively easy with the exception of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Now,
Yeah,
these
a
studies
lot of those studies.
has been being very complicated first, as you said, and then a lot of studies are there to compete with a limited number of patients. Let's put it that way. Even though we apparently were more successful than the University of Miami Gastroenterology Clinic enrolling patients, so not to brag, but just a little bit.
Well, oftentimes private sites are better equipped at not only enrolling the patients, but doing the work. You know, a lot of these academic
Correct?
centers, I mean, they have residents doing the study coordinator. The residents
Correct.
don't even care about the study,
Yeah,
you know, or a lot of
exactly. Or the
these
principal investigator doesn't know anything about anything there. I mean,
yeah, and even worse if they're a key opinion leader, you know, because then the sponsor,
oh,
no matter what they do, the sponsor's still going to use them because they're prestigious,
right.
you know, university. You see that here a lot too with a lot of the UCs. And the UCs actually are good compared to other places in the country. But yeah, you see a lot of this like disinterested academic medical centers. And then like you see private sites outperforming them regularly, even though the volume of patients is 10 times more, if not 100 times more, at these academic centers. But they have
Correct.
so they also have so many studies to compete. Like
Right.
one of the places I monitor, because I'm a contract monitor as well. One of the academic centers I
Oh,
monitor, they have like 1,000 studies at any given time. I mean, it's huge, huge. So what's one study to that? I mean, the PI might not even realize they have that study at some point. So you know,
and how did
there's
they pick a patient to go to a specific study? Like
exactly.
how they pick the study. I mean, it's like,
They don't tell you. It's secret. It's their
yeah,
SOPs. It's the SOPs. But no, that's a
yeah,
good point.
sure,
It's a good point. And also the local IRBs. You know, there's a lot of advantages to being private sites. The majority of studies are done mostly by private sites. You know, you have some anchor
right.
academic medical centers for each study usually. Usually it's a key opinion leader. And it's also prestigious to have that name on clinicaltrials.gov. But really, like, the majority of the enrollment comes from private community clinics,
Private
which
side.
is something doctors
That's
don't
what I
realize
thought.
right now.
Correct. That's how it is.
Yeah, it's something like a lot of physicians now that, you know, a lot of physicians actually been furloughed during this pandemic. And so they're looking, they
Yeah,
might be
it's
listening
surprising.
to this podcast. They might want to go onto your LinkedIn profile, Dr. Nikolov, and say, hey, how did you do this? I want to do this in Chicago. So the blueprint is here, guys. Like, it's really just, it's a simple thing. It's getting the studies and getting the patients and doing the work on the study.
Correctly. I need to emphasize on doing the work correctly because you may be successful for a year or two, but if you don't do the work correctly, that's going to be it.
And what do you mean by the work correctly? Because let's make this like
Like, I mean,
tactical.
really follow the protocol, really do everything GCP. I mean, I've seen so many colleagues that don't care. Like, oh, we're going to get the money and then whatever, the coordinator will finish. It's not the coordinator's job to do many things that the physician need to do.
Right. PI oversight is a huge issue in the industry. It's usually the biggest finding of a FDA audit is the lack of PI oversight. Have you guys gone through a FDA audit?
You know, we've been lucky, but maybe now we'll be having it any moment.
Any
It's
moment.
a lot of years.
We've been
Any
lucky too.
moment.
We've been lucky too at our sites. I've only had a FDA. I've had an encounter with a FDA agent once.
Okay.
Came unannounced to one of my sites. Was looking for a PI who no longer worked with us for years, and I knew where he
Wow.
had his new office. He started his new clinic, and they were looking for him. And because our SEO was better, search engine optimization, they found our place instead of his place. And so I asked them what
Right.
study it is, and I was crossing my fingers it's not one of our studies we had with him, and it wasn't. It was one of the studies that I didn't recognize, so I said, hey, his office is over there, gave them the
Right
address.
there.
Yeah, and that's it. That was the extent of my FDA interaction as a site.
Well,
As a CRA, I've had
right.
FDA audits, but I wasn't there with the auditor.
Yeah. Usually CRS are not. I
Usually not.
heard.
Usually not. But usually you know if you're a monitor, if your sites are going to get audited, then you go in and do a cleanup,
Right.
before the FDA goes to the site. But yeah, I mean, one of the biggest issues, I was talking to a sponsor earlier today, and they're looking to get more minority participation in research. So they want more, and I told them my theory is you need more research naive physicians that serve those patients in the communities. Like where you are in Miami, perfect example. You want Latin, Hispanic population, you got it in Miami. If you want, like, you got to go to the inner cities to get African American population, and there's not a lot of research centers in these areas outside of the academic medical centers. And
Well, Miami is a little bit different. Miami, I think, has too many research centers, but that's my opinion.
what do you think? Why is that? Miami has this bad reputation for sites.
All right. That's what I, going back to my previous thought, is just so we had a lot of colleagues, unfortunately, who were just doing the numbers, not the work.
But why just
And I
there?
think
I
that's not
mean,
helpful to anybody.
that should be across the country, though. Why is it Miami's so prevalent with this? It's not even
Well,
one of the biggest cities.
unfortunately, unfortunately, there is a lot of, I think, fraud-prone people in Miami. Like
Hmm.
that will lead me, for example, to patients that go to multiple studies. I mean, that's not a problem only in Miami, but it's one of the cities that we see that more and more.
Hmm.
And it's very unfortunate for everybody involved, but people just don't care.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like, that's a perfect example because you are a good example of a successful client. Believe it or not, for our DSCS, which you see behind me, the DSC, this is how we help sites get studies and do
Right?
budgets and all that stuff. Our most successful clients of all time have both been from Florida, one in Orlando, one in Miami. I mean, multiple, seven-figure sites and started from nothing, from zero, just like you. So if you can make it in that market, you're like an example to someone in another place, like in the Midwest. The clients that are like in Iowa and Kansas, they can get all the studies we apply for because there's no
Yeah.
competition there. Uh,
Nobody competes there.
Nobody, but you're being successful in the most competitive market. So, what has been your you've been doing this since 2009, what like 11 years now. What has been your secret to success?
Well, one of the main things that we always try to do is meet our enrolling expectations um, on time and overperform. And obviously not screwing up on the way because, again, we need to do the work right. Uh, I've noticed something also. I don't want to label, nationalities, but unfortunately, there is some people that don't care so much about quality. Like protocol would say, do that, do that, do that in a specific order, and they would think, oh, I can do it, but doesn't need to be in that order.
Hmm.
And then, why do you decide that? I mean, it's right there. It needs to be done that way. And that's why we were being very lucky with our staff, people that we trained along the way, and very lucky with them. Very good people, professionals.
What does your staff consist of? Because you have a lot of indications now. You have a
Yeah,
lot of
we have.
how many
Yeah.
sites, how many coordinators,
No, we
PIs?
just have one site. We are
Okay.
relatively small. We have six PIs, seven now, and we have eight research coordinators, two part-time research coordinators, or one recruitment specialist,
Hmm.
one lab technician, two assistants, and one pharmacy technician. And we have
Wow.
one advanced registered nurse practitioner who is serving as a super investigator for a lot of the studies. She's on site all the time. And now we have a physician on site all the time, so we are very lucky with that too.
What's your average yearly number of studies you guys conduct?
Around 80, 90.
80 or 90. Wow. Okay, so that's a huge site. Like, how many square feet are we talking about? Is it an entire building, or what do you have?
Well, we have three buildings. We actually, they're small offices put together, three buildings. Approximately, we're talking 4,500 square feet. We're
Okay,
actually constructing a new office building now because we really need to expand.
and
We're at least working on the project.
that's a really good problem to have. Do you do inpatient? Do you have
Yeah,
inpatient
agree.
capabilities?
We have very limited. We have only three beds, and we try to avoid them because we don't have sufficient staff to do that. But if something shows up for limited number of patients, limited number of nights, we'll take it.
Hmm.
And with the new facility, we'll have a 10-bed inpatient facility, hopefully in a year and a half.
Wow. Yeah, 80 to 90 sites is huge. I mean, you're probably, for as far as
But
private
remember, we're
sites,
not doing a lot of patients. Like some of these are hard indications
right,
that you can enroll. Like on an asthma study, we can enroll 20, 30, 40 patients. Ulcerative colitis, we can enroll one to three.
right. A lot of yes, this is how the industry has changed, if anything, from when I started to now. You used to be able in 2005, 2006 to get just a few studies, like two
Right,
studies. If you had two studies, you can support back then like six staff, six
right,
coordinators, a couple PIs, because you can enroll like 20, 30 patients in each one, and the budgets are pretty
right.
good. Now you need more studies because you can only put maybe 1 to 5 in each study. Is that what you're seeing? Like
That's exactly what I'm seeing.
from these 80 studies that you
Exactly.
have, like what percentage of them are very low enrolling studies?
90, 92.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay. And Chris
I
and
mean,
I,
that's what they expect. The study is so difficult that you can enroll more patients,
yeah.
even if you want to.
I think the worst thing for a site to
Um,
do, Chris and I always advise our clients when they ask us, hey, this study's complicated, should we take it? We always tell them, look, if you think you can enroll 1 to 3 studies, or 1 to 3 patients in this study, you should do it. Don't take it if you don't think you can get anybody, because if the worst thing you can do to a sponsor is give them zero patients. They'll
that's a
love you
very,
if you do
very good
one.
advice. Yeah, that's a very good advice. Yeah, we should all abide by that. We've been doing it like that too. Though in the beginning I was like, oh, let me see, maybe we'll get that, maybe we'll find patients later. Not a good idea for anybody involved.
Zero is the worst number you can give to a pharma. I mean, they have sunken costs that go into your site, just to
Of
activate your
course,
site. The CRA fees, all the vendors. They have to pay for all these vendors per site. So, they
correct.
really don't like that. But if you get at least one, they may not be
They're
the
okay.
happiest with you, but they get some data out of it, and they even come back to you again for more studies.
Correct.
If your work
I
was
agree.
if your
Totally.
work was decent, if your work was decent.
I agree.
Um, I think in Miami to stand out, and also in LA where I'm located, I think because we have a little bit of that competition, not as bad a reputation as Miami with the, but but the competition is there. The duplicate patients problem
Oh yeah.
is here as well. Uh, I think in places like where we are, you have to focus on your quality more than other places, more than other sites. I think because
I
I
agree.
at a DIA, I think it was DIA last year in 2019 here in San Diego. I met with several of the large CROs, and I asked them all. They were like the managers in charge of getting sites. I asked them all, hey, what are you looking for? Because we have the site network, all this stuff. What are you looking for sites? They said the number one most important thing is patience. Patience and speed. How quickly can you get started? And then how quickly can you get us the data? And then we asked them, well, what
Correct.
about quality? What about how fast they answer queries? And they said, they stopped me right there and said, no, that doesn't matter to us. What matters is the patience and the startup. So,
Really?
exactly, but I think you and I are shocked because of where we're located. I think we're expected to have the quality as well.
More.
But I think in other sites, like in other locations, it's a little more lenient on that because there's not the competition there, is what I'm gathering from these conversations. I was shocked too. I said, "Hey, the most important thing is the quality of the data, right?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Of course, that's important, but it's a distant thought. What we want is the patience. We want the numbers, and we want you start up quickly, and we want the data entered relatively quickly."
So yeah, that's true. I mean, it's very important for them to start the study on plant. We've been one of the first sites to start. What do you call it? The pilot sites,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, if they don't enroll patients, the study won't have any data. Doesn't matter if it's quality or not quality. But obviously, we'll still need to do the quality. Anybody,
Right.
everybody should do it.
Now during coronavirus, so a lot of sites had to furlough
Yeah.
staff. A lot of even CROs. Did you guys have to do any of that?
No, we've been again very lucky. We were part of the what do you call it? No, no. What do you call it?
Essential?
Importance essential,
Essential.
essential people. It's very funny how people are divided in essential and non-essential. But I guess we were essential, so we were staying open. Obviously, we took a lot of measures as far as disinfection, protection of staff, protection of patients.
Were patients still visiting the site, or were you doing like telehealth
Sure.
visits? What was
We were
you?
trying to avoid telehealth as much as possible. I personally don't think that coronavirus is such a threat, but that's my personal opinion. After that, obviously, we took all the precautions. Patients were wearing masks, staff is wearing masks, disinfection very frequently of surfaces,
Mm-hmm.
hands. We started fumigating with disinfector daily, all the areas and surfaces, um, and obviously asking patients whether they have symptoms or don't have symptoms before they come to the site. We started giving away a lot of masks to patients because they couldn't even find masks.
Mm-hmm.
But that's helpful to everybody. And then we actually went a little bit further. We implemented a system of scanning or looking for IgM, IgG antibodies. Though obviously right now the industry is not very clear what the results really mean.
Right.
Uh, we've been trying to screen patients for IgM and IgG. And if they have IgM positive, we will do a swab and send them home. If it's negative, we bring them back and continue the visit.
Did you change your SOPs for this?
We we did we didn't change the SOP because I personally don't like to change SOPs in details because I need to really abide by them. But we have an operating procedure for
Okay.
that.
And what about, because this is like a lot of our clients are now coming to us because we help sites negotiate their budgets too,
Sure.
especially when they're newer, they need more help with that. We also create source and all that stuff for them. But we had a lot of clients coming to us and say, hey, we need to increase our overhead because of these extra measures we're taking. And it sounds like you're taking a lot of precautions there. Are you increasing your overheads for these studies?
This is a very good question, and we are actually discussing right now exactly that situation. Our overhead went 5%.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm going to be able to renegotiate those contracts. So we are asking for reimbursement of personal protection equipment for the tests. And let's see, some sponsors have been responsible and agreeing to pay and reimburse us. Some say flatly no. So at the moment, I was like, okay, then your patients are not going to be enrolled in this study in my site until this thing finishes. I mean, it's simple.
Right, which is going to take a long time for this thing to finish,
Yeah.
according to.
I mean, I really don't understand. I don't know. To me, it's like a disinterest. It's like, we're not going to pay you for that. Then can you send me some PPE because it's hard to find it? And he said, no. But you know what? Two sponsors actually send us PPE, and I'm going to do a shout to them. That's Eastside, and the other one was AstraZeneca,
Wow.
because other people would say no,
Hmm.
flatly. I'm not going to reimburse you. I don't want to send you PPE.
Wow. Yeah, so then how can you see the patients if that's the case? From our experiences, roughly half of the sponsors agree to the increase in overhead. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Good.
if you
So now maybe it's going to start some kind of usual thing, and then people will agree.
I think this is like everything that if you can increase your overhead, because like you said, this coronavirus thing's never going to end. I mean, there's theories that it's going to keep coming back every year like a flu.
Yeah,
So that's going to maybe be a permanent part of the overhead now. Like these procedures we're doing might just be permanent, so it
it
might
is
not,
very expensive. You're
yeah,
right.
it may not hurt to go ask,
That's a very good question.
I think so too. What is your thoughts on the state of the industry now? Like you're seeing, so you have 80 studies at any given time. How many are in the pipeline? Like, because I've seen a lot from March until recently. I've seen so many feasibility surveys. I mean, I've never seen this many in a long time. So I'm sure you're seeing the same kind of thing, right?
We've seen a lot of studies. I think the industry is alive and well. And this is my opinion, obviously, but I think this industry is going to be okay. I personally, we don't have a lot of study in the pipeline. Maybe we will have approval for 3 studies that we are waiting to start.
Mm-hmm.
But we fulfilled a lot of feasibilities. You're right. So maybe something else will show up.
Yeah, I think like in the late summer, early fall, we're gonna see a lot of sites getting activated for these new studies. What about monitoring? How are you monitoring during
We
this?
stopped monitoring visits altogether. We're doing remote monitoring visits. Though it's really frustrating to me specifically because this is taking a lot of work for us as a site.
Scanning, right? All the documents.
Yeah,
I think eSource is going to be something that
a solution.
in this next decade. Yeah, we use Creo for one of our sites.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
So is it
clinicalresearch.io.
working okay?
It's actually works really good. Especially, I have a lot of clients who are using it now too, and they're also they're site owners, but they're also CRAs, and so they're not always there to supervise their coordinators.
But you can check it that way. Perfect.
Exactly. You can check it on your phone and say, hey, then you can call the coordinator. I noticed, this is not complete what happened here. So it's actually pretty cool for that. And for monitoring, it's also very good because you don't have to scan anything. I mean,
Right.
everything is there. It's so I see it as like for sure this next decade, eSource will become like the new EDC, in my opinion. Just like when I entered the industry, it was still one more year of paper, and then the next year was literally every study was EDC. It's going to be, I think, the same in 3 to 5 years is my prediction for eSource.
Maybe even earlier.
Maybe, maybe, maybe. But scanning the source documents, redacting, that's tough, especially with that many studies that you
Yep.
have. I mean, your coordinators basically become full-time document scanners.
Don't like me in these moments.
That's another thing. How do you, it's very challenging to retain employees. Um,
Yes, it is.
you know, you see it at academic centers all the time. They go on to become CRAs, or maybe they go on to become nurses or go to medical school. But at private sites, the temptation is for coordinators to want to go to CRA because the salary is higher, and
Right.
there's really no way of stopping it. Like the way I do it with my staff is say, hey, if that's what you want to do, tell me. I'll help you get there. Just give me 2 years, and I'll help you to get there. There's really no other way to combat this. I think. What are your thoughts on this?
This is actually a very good question. I guess we've been lucky. We don't have a lot of people leaving, but we try to motivate them as well. But these conversations definitely needs to be done. What's your plan for the future? Tell me, I'll help you. But if you want to stay with us, you'll grow with us. If you don't want to stay with us, you want to do something else, let me know, and then I'll guide you. But don't, let me dry one day.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
my wife is actually very in charge of that, Amy,
Hmm.
of helping out staff with whatever they need.
So more
And
of a human resources type.
human resources, there you are.
That's good because I'm honest with all the employees. I tell them, look, even if you want to start your own clinic, like I will help you.
Yeah.
I will help you do that. Just don't open it across the street. But because if you do, you're not going to succeed. But if you open it somewhere else, like far enough away, I could even help you out maybe, or maybe I could be like a minority partner if you want. And I learned that the hard way
Wow.
because when I first started, again, what we talked about at the beginning, the first 1 to 2 years, you're learning everything. Like every mistake you
Right.
can make, I made. I had coordinators. I had a busy clinic my first 2 years because I took over this clinic that was falling apart, but they had a bunch of studies, high enrolling, and easy to enroll. So I just started hiring. I hired my friend from college. He was good. Then I hired other people. Then they brought in their friends. Pretty soon, like I lost touch with them. And what happened because I like to delegate everything to them. So site selection visits, I say, hey, you go in there with the PI. You know what you're doing. I don't have time to be in the site selection visit. They'll give us this study anyways. Just go in there. Well, you know what they did? They conspired with the one coordinator and the PI with the monitor during the site selection visit to do the study at their other site. And
Wow.
I was there in the office, but no one told me, including the CRA, because my fault. I didn't even introduce myself. I just was there
Do
at
you
the
know what
site.
the solution to that is called? NDA and non-compete.
I know, but even that is unenforceable, really, because
Well,
you have to sue
depends.
somebody. You have to, and that costs money, right?
Right, that's true.
That's the problem. That's the problem with those things. It's more of a like fear, of like, hey, you signed this, so
Fear.
you can't do this. But if they actually do it, and I discovered this weeks later that this happened,
Right.
because I emailed the sponsor, hey, I'm following up on the site selection visit. I thought it went well. What happened? And they said, oh, it was like an in-house CRA that said, oh yeah, we sent the startup packet. And I said, what? Where? Because this was when they mailed your startup regulatory.
Right.
I said, where? I
Wow.
didn't get it. And they said, oh, well, what's your address? I told them, they're like, no, no, this is the address we have. So then I drove there and I saw these dudes already have a clinic. It looked like in a ghetto place, but they already have a clinic. This is where all the stuff's going. So then I told the coordinator, what are you doing? And she said, well, this PI, he said, let's just do this
Hired me.
for ourselves. Basically, this was in my second year of doing business. Luckily,
Wow.
luckily it was not my only PI or my only coordinator. I actually kept the coordinator. I fired her friend because her friend was the one that actually did all this. And I kept her, and I said, "Look, don't do this. If you want to go with them, go with them. If you're gonna stay here, you got to do it with me." And she said, "No, I'm gonna stay here. It was more secure." And they went on and did that. It didn't work out, but man, I learned like from then. Hey, next time I hire somebody, I'm gonna talk to them like, "Hey, if you really want to do this, just let me
I
know."
mean, this is like a definitely weird stuff. I notice some CRAs because that's a mistake of the CRA. You can't have a site selection visit in one place, and then suddenly you do site initiation visit somewhere else. But whatever.
I wasn't in
I mean,
that
I won't be
room.
surprised to see anything.
I'm not surprised either. I wasn't in that room, and who knows how the PI
Yeah.
justified it. And I never, it was my fault. I never introduced myself to the CRA.
I had a similar situation with two PIs that they left, but okay, that's their.
It happens. It happens. But like keeping the coordinators. This is like a radical example of transparency. Like I actually, when I interview someone, I hire based on do I think this person is honest and upfront with me, not necessarily their skill
Right.
set, because their skill set I can
Yeah,
teach
because you
them.
can teach them.
Exactly. Honesty. Try teaching honesty to somebody that's not honest. It's not gonna happen.
That's a very good point. Wow.
I learned the hard way. We haven't had this problem since that I know of. Maybe it's happening. I just don't know. But yeah. So that's interesting. Very interesting. We keep our sites small though, so we're like the opposite of
Yeah.
you. Like we have many small sites that probably do between 6 to 10 studies per year. But they're all over LA. Technically, they compete with each other, but not really. And we try to have different indications. But our bread and butter is psychiatry. Um,
Wow.
so that's the strategy here that we have. And honestly, if a coordinator like wants to go somewhere else because they moved, now they have probably one of our other sites there that they can go to. So we've done a lot of that too. There's advantages to both. The big site
Of
and then
course.
a bunch of the small sites. Pros and cons, just like with everything else. Have you ever considered
I
like
agree.
doing small sites, like little sites here and there, just to like protect yourself more from Miami? Like maybe
Uh,
doing something at Orlando or somewhere else.
I have considered it. We had proposals, but I'm a little bit worried because I can't practically control it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it comes to the trust. I mean, I really wanted things to be done right, and I don't know if they're done right if I'm not there.
That's right. I guess one of the good things about being in the LA area is I can drive. It's a huge.
To
I
any one
mean,
of them.
yeah, this is a jungle here. Like you can drive, and there's other sites you're passing, but you can still get there within the day. In other
Oh,
places, it's a little bit different. You can't do that as much. But yeah, very interesting to talk to other site owners about their strategies for growing. Because initially, I was on the same course. Hey, let's get a big site. But then the way things started playing out, I think it honestly had a lot to do with the YouTube when I started that, people started approaching me about little opportunities. So then I would just invest with them, and pretty soon it became this like little islands here and there of sites that we have. So it worked out that way. But
nice.
the big site works well because you can eventually do like more phase one, and then it's always nice to establish yourself as like the dominant player in your space as opposed to just another site.
We're trying for that. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else that we missed during this? What are your thoughts on
I'm sure we missed a lot of things.
virtual trials? What are your
Which company?
thoughts? The sponsors love virtual
See,
trials. They want siteless. They're calling it
uh,
siteless trials. It's. I'm offended
yeah.
actually.
I'm actually offended too. I would
Good.
call it that that's a lot of bull. Can you say that on YouTube? I don't
You
know,
could say
but
anything on YouTube.
I don't think that has any future. But maybe I'm too optimistic. I don't know.
Well,
In my opinion, you can have no good data, no good relationship, nothing in a virtual trial. But that's my opinion.
see, that's my opinion too. But our naysayers, which are many, would tell us, well,
Yeah,
we're too invested in what we're doing to see this as a reality. Uh,
opportunity.
right, and
Yeah.
I understand. I understand. I actually had a conversation with one CRO that we're doing this for, and the way they explained it to me, I don't know if I believe them, but the way they explained it to me is with our virtual trials, these are studies that are not meant to replace our traditional studies. These are meant to supplement
That's how
those
everything
studies.
starts.
That's how it starts. That's what I'm thinking too. But the way they explained it was so good. It's like, okay, I understand the theory of it. Like the sponsor
Yeah,
basically is enrolling the patients themselves, maybe through a CRO. The problem with that is patients don't trust big pharma or even little pharma. Patients trust their doctors. So
correct.
I think you can't really replace this and just have one PI in every state that's going to see all these patients
Yeah,
virtually.
I mean to me it's idiotic. We have a good relationship with our patients. They trust us. We're like family. I mean, honestly. And then I was in one of these conferences a couple of years ago. One of the big pharma had a presentation how virtual trials are going to be everywhere. Oh no, they were doing something else. They were
That's
trying to
every
do
conference.
the
Every
visits
conference
in
is this.
Walgreens or in
Yes,
Eckerd.
yes, I remember that one.
It's like, okay, sure, go for it. I mean, it's going to be a total disaster.
Well, the proponents of it say that there's a place for it, and it's not meant to replace traditional trials. I'm actually more on that bandwagon now. Because some of those studies it is possible to do like at Walgreens in theory because the only assessment is like a nasal swab or like a saliva
Right,
sample. Okay, I guess you
right,
could do that there like at Walmart. Um, I don't think you can do the studies we're talking about with these complicated inclusion exclusion criteria where you have 80 to 90 of these studies and really only putting like 3
right,
patients in each one. So I don't think that's
right.
going to be virtual. I don't think it even makes sense to have those be virtual.
Well, yeah, maybe you're right. And some smaller studies will make more sense to be done that way.
I don't know. Only time will tell. But I've one thing I've noticed is if the industry really wants something, it will happen, even if it becomes a
Yeah.
failure. They will push for it. So virtual
Well,
trials.
just for note, we did get virtual certified.
Yeah, me too. We get virtual certified because there's elements. So then there's the whole thing of the hybrid trials. You still have the
Right,
sites, but then every other assessment, every other visit is done at the patient home through telehealth.
right,
I don't know. That the jury's still out on that. It makes sense during this pandemic because patients are
right,
not comfortable coming to the site or
right,
whatever, but it doesn't make sense during normal times unless you have patients in very rural places that can't travel. But then the
right.
problem always becomes how do you get that patient interested in a study? Like, is Pfizer gonna call them, or are they gonna watch an ad on TV and call? I mean, maybe, but I don't think patients trust pharma. I mean, they really don't.
It's going to be very hard. Maybe it's a combination would work.
Yeah. Oh, who knows? Who knows? In 10 years, we'll know better, I think. And in 10 years, our jobs may be different, but they'll still be the same. It's just, more e-source, e-patient reported outcomes. I could see how the temptation is to call that virtual, but you still need the site and the patient care at some point. And I know research is not supposed to be patient care, but it really is. I mean,
But I mean, this is a very good point that you're making. I've always been advocating that research is patient care.
hmm,
I really don't get the concept. Oh, we're not patient care; they're clients or whatever subjects.
subjects.
Tell them they're subjects. I mean, I honestly have more problems explaining that to anybody. Just we deal with a lot of uninsured patients that we actually care about them and make them better. Even if they're on placebo, they receive more care, more treatment, and more tests than otherwise.
Absolutely true. I mean, we deal, with psych, you have a lot of patients, Medicare doesn't cover almost anything, and these psych patients don't even go to their appointments. That's the nature of the illnesses. We've discovered,
Right,
you know how many times we've discovered in a patient, you have hepatitis, you have HIV, you didn't know this? Like, we're the ones who found it
right.
because they're in a study. Because they're not even getting their
Well, I
labs
have the
done.
same observations. Totally true.
So in some way, it is care, even if they're screen fail. You're giving them their results and saying, "Hey, go see your doctor. Give them these. Here's a copy of your lab results."
In many cases, it's care because what are you going to do? Like we have patients with low hemoglobin, we need to give him some therapy. Just can drop him on the street, go to emergency care. Well, depends on the situation, but
Yeah.
we have responsibility for our patients.
100%. Dr. Nikolov, it's been a pleasure, a very
The
good
pleasure is mine.
podcast, and a lot of entertaining, informative, and tactical things people can take away. I guess there's a lot of different people that are going to be listening or interested in this. I feel a lot of them are people that want to start sites, and I feel that a smaller percentage are people that already run sites. In either case, you want to network with Dr. Nikolov. His LinkedIn profile will be in the show notes, and it doesn't hurt to network with people. Like, what is your? I guess we can end
Sure.
with this. What is your feelings on networking? Because I know some sites, they don't want to share any studies, and I know other sites complete opposite. They're like, yeah, you share with us, we'll share with you studies. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I'm totally about sharing and discussing situations, discussing even studies as far as the confidentiality agreements, and definitely sharing studies because we need to work together. I think that actually the future is going to be not so much on individual sites, but more of a bigger, I guess, corporation, multi sites,
Like site networks.
like site networks.
I think that's a perfect way to end this. Some food for thought for everybody who's on board. So thank you very much again, Dr.
Thank you,
Nikolov.
Dan.
And we'll have links again to where you can connect with him in the show notes. Thank you, everybody. Stay well. Talk to you later.